You can see my screen. You can see my screen, just to confirm.
Yes, we can.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So thanks everyone from my side as well for joining. Really appreciate it. We've seen now in the poll that we just had that the majority is not yet super familiar with coded automation. And that's why we want to give you a really quick primer into the topic itself before we jump into the presentations and the demos themselves. At any point in time, if there are questions, please post them into the chat. So the first and most obvious question might be, what actually is coded automation? And coded automation is actually a new feature we've introduced in public preview in 23.6. And this feature allows you to write automation directly in code rather than using low-code activities. Now, you might ask, why did we do that in the first place? Why did we introduce such a functionality? Well, the initial idea was actually introduced by our own developers who simply prefer working in their common environment, using tools and technologies they are familiar with. And based on a first prototype, we decided that there lies a lot of potential in offering such a code-based interface to our experienced automation developers. So why coded automation? With coded automation, we wanted to achieve certain goals. First of all, we want to support developers who simply prefer writing code instead of using low code. We also want to foster the collaboration of automation teams with different skill sets, allowing business experts and seasoned developers to work together on the very same project. And of course, we wanted to give our community the flexibility to build new tools, new capabilities on top of our solution. So here is how it actually works. You are now able to write automation using pure C# code directly within Studio. For better collaboration, a Studio project can include both low-code as well as coded workflows. What is more, you can invoke low-code workflows from code and vice versa. And as of today, there are 3 activity packs that are supported to be used in coded automation directly, which are UiPath System, UI automation, and testing. So, in case you did not yet have the chance to further look into this new functionality, I would kindly invite you to join our insider preview for coded automation, which can be directly accessed via our insider portal. You know the deal. And here you will be able to further drill into the topic. There is a detailed description and plenty of examples that get you started quickly. Right now, we plan to release coded automation into GA in our upcoming release 23.10. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Thomas Janssen to walk us through the first example, leveraging coded automation as well as open AI to perform automated sentiment analysis. So Thomas, stage is yours. I stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, so in my use case, so as I mentioned, we will be discussing 2 use cases. I will show a bit more about robotic process automation. I think where most people know UiPath from. And Thomas will later show more about test automation and how you can automatically create test cases with ChatGPT. In the example that I'm going to show you, the use case is as follows. I recently started a hamburger restaurant, just like Mr. Beast, with the Mr. Beast burger. And for this hamburger restaurant, I receive customer feedback. So of course, some people, they like my hamburgers, they like the restaurant, and some people, they think there is still room for improvement. So what I'm going to do is with the feedback, you can find the feedback in an Excel file. And as Christina already mentioned, you can download this entire use case and you can just run it in UiPath or just modify it. So I'm going to use ChatGPT to make sense of this feedback and to give every piece of feedback a sentiment score. So if people are really positive about my restaurant and my burgers, ChatGPT is going to provide a score of 100. And if the customer is really negative, it's going to be 0 or 5 or 10, something like that. Then I have another application. And if you've earlier use my YouTube channel, give me a second because there is a bar here. If you've earlier used my YouTube channel, then you might already be familiar with this website. It's rpa-unlimited.com, and that's a website that I share, and it's full of example automation applications. So there are lots of applications, and the one that we are going to use today is this one. It's called My Feedback, and this is an application that we're going to use to store this feedback. How does this application work? You can see that you have to fill in the customer name, for example, Thomas, and then you provide the sentiment. And then the sentiment score, it's either could not analyze the sentiment, it's 0, 5, or it's 90 or 100, as you can see. So those are the different scores. Then let's take a look at the feedback that I got for my restaurant. I just started this restaurant, so there's also some negative feedback. For example, Teresa says the restaurant has an amazing ambience. The burgers tasted really good as well. Fries were a bit cold, though we got new ones after complaining. Okay, that doesn't sound too good. I'm going to use ChatGPT, and the prompt that I'm using is this one. The message I will provide consists of customer feedback for a hamburger restaurant. Please analyze the sentiment of the following message. Provide a score between 0 and 100, where 0 stands for a negative experience and 100 for a very positive experience. You've already seen the application, and you've probably seen that in the application. I'm going to show it one more time. You can only choose between 0, 5, 10, 5, etc. Right? So I'm also asking ChatGPT only return numbers divisible by 5. For example, 5, 10, 15, etc. Provide no other feedback than the score. And this is very important because if you don't say this, ChatGPT is going to say something like, hey, this client said this, or it's going to say, for this particular client, the score is 10. So you just want to get back 10 and not all the rest, right? Okay, and then you put here the feedback. So I'm just going to put the feedback that I just read out. The restaurant has an amazing ambience, etc. Okay, so let's put this in ChatGPT, and then you will see that the score for this customer is 90. I think it's still quite on the high side, as this person said that the fries were cold, but okay, that's ChatGPT. Let's try another one. Let's try this one, great burger. So I'm just going to copy the entire prompt. And then I'm going to take great burgers. Sorry. Okay, feedback is 95. Let's try a really, really negative one. This place sucks. They never change their menu, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm going to put that here. I'll put the prompt here. And let's see what we get. Okay, 15. Okay, so you see that these numbers, they make sense. Really negative comments, they get a lower score. Really positive comments, they get a very high score. Okay, so our next question is how are we going to integrate this into UiPath? For that, I just developed this robot. I'm going to start with opening the main.xaml. You see, the first thing that we do is we open a browser, and in the browser, we're going to open the page that you've just seen, which is the RPA Unlimited page, which is this one. Okay, so that's the page that we're opening. So that's this URL. I put it here. Okay, and then the first thing that we're going to do, I designed this bot modular, but I didn't design it with the RE framework, just to keep it very simple. The first thing that you want to do is you want to read the input. So the only thing that the read input.xaml does is it reads the input from the Excel file, and I will show that. And if you look at the arguments, it's just reading the range, sheet 1, and then it's assigning complaints to customer complaints. And you can see here that complaints is an argument with the direction out, okay? So this entire data table is going to be taken to the main. And then, so with this data table, you see here for each row in data table. So now we're going to do something with every feedback or with every complaint. We're going to do two things for every one of them. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check the sentiment. And for that, we're going to use checksentiment.xaml. And the second thing is we're going to write this feedback to the application that you've already seen in rpaunlimited.com. And the application is just a sample application as this, how you can very well, you can imagine that this would be a process in a normal company to store all these pieces of feedback in a system. Okay, so check sentiment. So the thing that we are doing here is we're doing two things that are, I would say, quite new. We are leveraging ChatGPT, which is already, I would say, a challenge on its own. And then we're also going to use coded automation. The library that I use for chat completion, if I navigate to manage packages and then navigate to project dependencies, you will see that the one that I use here is OpenAI by UiPath. This is a package that corresponds directly with OpenAI. And if you're interested in how to create an OpenAI key, you can watch this video on my channel, how to get an OpenAI/ChatGPT API key that shows you how to get the key. It's good to know if you're working for an organization, a business, then you can also use the Azure OpenAI, because that one doesn't use your data as training data, right? Okay, so this is the package that you need. It's just called OpenAI. You can find it here in the packages manager. Okay, then let's expand this one a bit. If I navigate to the properties, you will see that I'm using GPT 3.5 Turbo, and that's because GPT-4 is a better model, but this one is doing a good job. But it's as well a paid model, so I've just chosen for 3.5. All the other things I did not change. The only thing that I changed is the top generated text. This one I stored an out sentiment score. And I also changed the prompt, and I will just put it prompt on the screen. It's the same prompt that I also showed you in ChatGPT. The message I'll provide consists of customer feedback. Please provide a score between 0 and 100, etc., etc. And then you see here in-client feedback, which is the incoming argument with the actual customer feedback. Okay. So it's really easy to connect with ChatGPT. As I mentioned, there are more videos. For example, this one where you can learn how to connect with ChatGPT on my channel, Tom's Tech Academy. Okay, so that's the only thing I do in this XAML. I connect with the chat completion with OpenAI. I use the arguments in client feedback, and out is then the sentiment score, right? So the only thing that goes out is 90, 95, 30, 45, etc. Okay, once I go back to the main.xaml, so this one will provide an argument. You will also see that here, which is out sentiment score, and the value is score. So score is chained to this number, and then here I will say that. So you always, if you're using coded automation, you always have output, and in this case, the type of the output argument is a Boolean, which is success. And there are two inputs. One of them is score. Score is just like the score that we've already seen. You see that I convert the score that we've earlier received to an integer with C integer. That's just a normal function in the .NET framework. And then we have customer, which is a string, and that's the name of the customer. So we are not getting the actual complaint here. We're only getting the sentiment score, 40 or 45, and the name of the customer. Okay, then if I navigate to write my feedback.cs, and this is the actual coded automation. And if you want to create a coded automation file, just click here on new, coded workflow. You will be asked for a name, for example, workflow. You click on create, and you can start using coded automation. The way to connect with coded automated workflows is the same. You just click here on directory icon. You change to all files, and then you select the .cs file, for example, this one. Okay, so it's really easy. And then you make sure that the arguments match with the input variables. Okay, when I go back to write my feedback.cs and I compare it with workflow.cs, in the beginning, we always get this public void execute. Void is the output argument. So if you want it to be like an integer or a string, you just put string here. And between execute, here between the parentheses, you put the input variables. And if I go back to to my feedback.cs, you will see public bool, because the output variable is Boolean. You see here return true. And the input variables are int score and string customer, right? And those ones are matching with the ones that you've just seen in the main.xaml, score and customer, okay? Those values are changed to them. I hope this is all clear. If you are not following anything, let us know in the chat and I can slow down a bit. Okay, right to my feedback.cs. You will see here log score.toString and customer.toString. You can just use the log function to see if your variables are correctly passed. If I now run this script, let's just run it. Compilation error, what happened?
I think you have a typo in your previous class
No,
file.
I already know what happened. I think I run the write to my feedback. Where did you see a typo, Thomas?
Workflow.cs. The one that you created there, you have a syntax error. You have the execute method, but it don't return anything. Just remove that and you're good.
Yeah, I'm going to remove it. And what's also very important, I always forget it, and I think that's also one of the reasons, is that you have to run from the main.xaml because you need input arguments. So let's run from here. So at this moment, we are using ChatGPT. We're generating the sentiment, but we are not. The Excel file is probably open. Could that be it? No, specified workbook. Okay, yeah, let's try it again. Okay, so you see it's opening the workbook. It's using ChatGPT. It should use ChatGPT, and it should now write back the sentiment. Give me a second. Yeah, you see that the bot is still running, and it already closed the Excel, and that's because now from the data table, it's corresponding with ChatGPT to get the sentiment scores. So let's give it a bit more time. I see here the names and the sentiment score. So you see here, for example, the I think it's quite small for you to see, but you see here that the system is logging the sentiment scores and the names of the clients. Okay. Let's give it one more second to finalize. I'm just going to stop it here. Okay, so the sentiment scores are here, and the customer names are also here. So that was already part of the framework. Let's now see how we can use coded automation here. And the first thing that is important, if you use coded automation, is that the easiest way to work with coded automation is to use the object repository. Same with normal automation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Chrome. I'm going to navigate to my application. Come on, rpaunlimited.com. And then I'm going to show the bot how to type in this application. Okay, so let's click here on the plus symbol. I'm going to just create a new application, create application. And within that application, I'm going to create screens. So right click, create screen. And the first screen, I'm going to call this one input screen. And then I have to, of course, show this application to UiPath. I'm going to click on this website. I'm going to click on create screen. Okay, in input screen, there are a few elements. So I'm going to create them. The first one that I want to create is the customer. So the name of the customer, I'm going to indicate this. Oh, sorry. I had to navigate to this particular page. Okay, so let's do this one again. Input screen, edit screen, edit application. So this is a screen that we actually want to automate. I'm going to log it and save it. Okay, then within this screen, I'm going to add elements. And the first one that I want to add is customer. Indicate the element. And that's the name of this customer. So you will see that this is the one you need. UiPath will automatically generate an answer. And it will automatically take the wrong answer. So I'm just going to remove this one and put it here. And confirm. And then click on save. Then the second element that I want to create, that's going to be the customer sentiment. Indicate element. And that's this drop down, right, that we've seen earlier. You see that automatically it takes the correct answer. I'm going to click on confirm. And then there is a third element that we need. And that's the button. Let's also show UiPath where the button is. That's this one. Click confirm. Okay, now what's important? Let's give 1 second to load. Okay, so what's important is that as soon as you've provided the customer, for example, Thomas, and I find the hamburger restaurant amazing, so I'm going to give it 100. You click submit, you get in this screen, and then you have to click on back, right? So that's the fourth element. After you've clicked on the button, you have to also make sure that you go back, because for the next one that you want to submit, you have to, you have to be in the previous screen, right? So let's add another element. Let's call this one back link, indicate elements, and let's click on back. Okay, so this is just what you have to do to make sure that you have the objects in your object repository. If you use UiPath the correct way with low-code automation, not with coded automation, you would also use your object repository. It's a good practice. Click on save. Okay, so I have the elements, and now the only thing that I still need to do is generating the actual code. You've already seen that I've opened the browser here in the main.xaml, right? So we don't have to open it, we just have to attach to this browser. So what I'm going to do here is screen is equal to UI automation. This is referring to the UI automation library dot attach. And I want to attach to this screen. You always attach to the screen, never to the application. And the name of the screen is input screen. So input screen. And of course, you close with semicolon. And I've made I just have to define that I'm declaring a variable here. Yeah. Okay. And after I've declared screen, I'm going to say screen because I want to type in the first field. So screen dot type into. The names are the same as in UiPath low code. So what I want to type, I want to write in the customer field. So I'm referring to this customer field here. And what I want to type, that's this input variable string customer. So customer, just close with a semicolon. And screen dot. The second thing that I want to do is this one. So you see that I cannot type here. It doesn't make sense. So I have to select. And in UiPath, this is called select item. I just have to indicate where I want to select, which is sentiment. And I'm referring here to sentiment, that object that I've created here earlier. And what I want to select, that's score. There's one thing that is important. I'm now getting an error here, and that's because score is an integer, and I have to transfer it. I have to cast it to a string. So I'm just going to use toString just as you would do in the low-code UiPath. So I filled these forms. So the only thing that I still have to do is I have to click, screen.click. If you click, you don't have to provide input what you want to click. You just have to provide the element. So that's button. And after I've clicked, see, I still have an error here. Cannot convert from method group to string. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, Thomas, you taught me this. Exactly. So make sure that you use the parentheses here, the opening and the closing parentheses here in C#. Okay, so I've clicked on the button. Then the only thing that I still have to do is I have to click on that link. Click. Back link, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Okay. You will see that this method will always return true. You can improve this. You can return true if it was successful and false if it was not successful. In this quick demo, I don't want to take more of Thomas' time, so I'm just going to skip that part. But let's see if it works now. So I'm going to run my bot. It's going to take a few minutes, I think. Make sure that you're in the main when you run this bot, because again, the .cs you cannot run because it needs input arguments. Run it from the main and then click on run. Let's see what it does. So you see that the bot starts typing the names of the clients. It also adds the sentiment. And it's populating them one by one. I think this is a really interesting use case. You can build it in a few minutes, especially if you're using the template that will be provided to you after this demo. Thomas, I don't want to take any more of your time. The only thing that's maybe good to show, give me 1 second. The only thing that's good to show. Of course, the bot is taking my screen. I'm going to close this one. Yep. The only thing that's good to show is the architecture here. So you see that I do the main loop. I perform this one in the main.xaml. I use read input, check sentiment.xaml, and write to my feedback.cs. And you see that check sentiment and write to my feedback.cs. Those are in the main loop. That's where they're invoked. Make sure to use the sample application rpaunlimited.com. If you want to know more about ChatGPT, then you can always check out my YouTube channel, Tom Stack Academy, and I will share the link. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Let me share my screen. You can see my screen now?
Yes, all good. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Thomas, for walking us through this great RPA project. Looking forward to trying it out myself after that session. Now that we have presented you how to leverage coded automation and OpenAI in the context of RPA, I would like to use the remaining time that we have to focus on the area of software testing. For that, let me quickly jump over to Jira. That's our starting point. Let's assume our developers created an app, which is the UiPath web application. And this web application allows you to interact with your bank. You can apply for loans, you can apply for credit cards, you can check your checking balance, and so on and so forth. And one of the latest stories they have implemented is the following one: apply for loan. So within this UiPath web app, the acceptance criteria is it should be possible to apply for a loan via the UiPath web app. And there are certain criteria. Applicants that are older than 80 or younger than 18 should not be applicable to apply. Applicants with a yearly income that is over 100,000 should get a loan up to 1 million. Applicants with a yearly income below 10,000 should only be able to get a loan up to 20,000. So those acceptance criteria are also our test criteria. So that's what we have to test within Studio. To do so, let's move over to Studio. Here I have my project. And the first thing is I want to create a coded workflow for this, or better to say a coded test case. Thomas already showed how coded workflows work, basically. For test cases, it's pretty much the same. You end up with a C# class, which inherits from coded workflow. It has an execute method, which is our entry point for the test case, and it is tagged with the attribute test case. That's all you want to know. So this is our entry point for the test case, and here we now can create our automation. As mentioned, there is 3 packages supported: system, testing, and UI automation. For testing our scenario now, we would focus on UI automation mainly. You've also seen that it is very handy to have object repository in place because it helps you to easily access the selectors. I've now, in the interest of time, I've prepared a ready-to-use test case here. Otherwise, I think we wouldn't make it. And this test case now goes through the UiPath web app. It clicks on products, loans, apply for loans. So it does some click operations, some type into operations. It selects items. And at the very end, we get a loan rate, and we verify that the loan rate that we get is actually equal to the expected one. So that's how you would create a coded UI-based test case. Now, Thomas already mentioned, you can access the selectors directly by handing over a string, but there is also overloads. So instead of that, you could use native selectors. So you could create the selectors without object repository as well, or you could also access it as objects. So you could call object repository dot descriptors. Then you use your application, in this case, the UiBank web app, as it's called in my object repository, and then the screen name. In this case, for example, the first screen is home. So that's also a possibility for you to interact or to use the selectors, whatever you prefer, either the string or the direct access via object. Now let's give this a quick run. You can see at the very beginning, we've got some arguments with our test data. This is the email we put in, the loan amount, the loan term, the yearly income, the age, and the expected loan rate. So let's give this a quick run. All right, project is compiling. We should move over to our browser in a second. There we go. Clicks on products, it clicks on loans, apply for loan. It fills in the form. And then it will click on submit loan application. And we will verify. We use a get text to get the value of that loan rate. And we will verify that in our test case. So far, so good. So that's our test case. That's pretty fine, right? That was pretty easy to build, pretty quick. Now, the actual question is, if we go back to our Jira user story, what should we do now to really meet those acceptance criteria in testing? We have to make sure that all those criteria are met and that we have test cases for that. So typically, you create a set of test data to accomplish that. You will create a set of test data that should focus or test all those scenarios. That can be done manually, that can be done using production data. But this brings us to our actual examples, which is we want to do that using OpenAI. We think generative AI is very helpful in that matter. So let me move over to my different project. This is called the test data generator. Let me quickly walk you through what it does. So it starts with a form. This is the user interface for our tester. In this form, you have a button called Select Test Case. If clicked, the trigger Select Test Cases would be called. And this trigger is a local trigger. It basically would invoke the Select Test Case class file, so a coded class file. If we look at that, this does not do a lot. It pretty much opens a file dialog and expects the user to select the test case he or she wants to create test data for. And it returns that path as part of that method. The next thing is you've got the path here, and you can provide additional context. You know, generative AI lives and breathes from context. You create a nice prompt that explains what you want to have, and that's what we can do here. And then you have a button to create the actual test data. For this again, we have a trigger here, and the trigger now invokes again a coded file, which is the create data. We look at the created data. It's pretty empty, but that's what we want to build together today. To finish up the flow here, at the very end, when we have created the test data, which comes in a CSV file, we can open the test data that was generated by opening Excel and putting that on the screen. So that's the goal. That's what we want to build here. So real quick, to do so, let's move over to the create data class file, because that's what we want to build. To speed things up, I've already added here kind of inventory of tasks we have to achieve. The first one is we want to read the content of our test case. So how do we do that? Well, as you can see, this class already gets handed over the test case file path. That's what we need to read it from our file, right? And that's fairly easy in .NET. You simply say file dot read all text, and then you provide test case file path. And of course, you want to store it in some sort of variable, right? So let's define a variable. All right, first task achieved. That was easy, right? The next one is we want to formulate a prompt that includes that test case file path and the additional context and does some magic so that we get a good result. That might be a little more than just one-liner, so let's create a separate method for that. Let's make it private because we only need it here. Let's make it string because it should return the prompt that we want to send. Let's name it create prompt. So what we need as an input here is, of course, test case content. And we also need the context, right? The additional context that was provided by the user via our form. Let's use that. And now we build a prompt. So we need a prompt. We will store it in a string variable. And how do we want to start? Well, the first thing to start the prompt with, I would suggest, is let's explain OpenAI what we want to do. So I would suggest something like, this is a definition of a test case, which takes certain arguments, period. Let's add a new line, environment, new line. Next thing, let's add now the actual test case, right? The test case content that we have extracted from the file. Let's add the test case content. And again, a new line. So next, we want to add the context, right? The additional, oh, here I have forgotten something. This is probably not enough, which takes certain arguments. We have to define what we want to do, right? So let's say, please generate test data for all arguments in a tabular format as a CSV string, something like that. That should be sufficient. Good. Now we have the test case content. That's an error on my end. Next thing is the context. So again, we use our prompt variable and add to our existing string the context. So we say additional context to be considered plus new line, and now we add the context. And that should be it. I think that's a not too bad prompt. Of course, later on, we always need to refine it depending on the results, but that's the beauty, right? Or the challenge, so to say. So let's return the prompt and let's call our method here. So we say create prompt. We hand over the test case content and we hand over the context. Again, we want to do something with it, right? So we have to store it in a variable. Prompt. Good. So far, so good. Next problem solved. Next one. Send it to GPT. Send the prompt to GPT. I went pretty much the same approach as Thomas already has shown you. So I have here generate test completion activity, which is part of our OpenAI connector. And if you look at the workflow, it takes an input, it takes a string for the prompt as an input, and it returns back with an out parameter, the test data. So that's what we want to invoke, right? We are now in low code, in code, but we want to invoke a low code and get something back from it. So let's do that. For this, we have a very easy extension method. You simply call run workflow, and you hand over the path to the workflow. In my case, it's simply called ask gpt.xml. Now, as you have seen, we have an input parameter that we will have to provide, which is the prompt. When I use the comma here, I see that the next input parameter is not a string, it's a dictionary. So it seems input parameters have to be handed over as a dictionary. So let's create a dictionary of type string and object. Let's name it input params. And let's add to that dictionary our prompt. So the name of the variable expected is called prompt. And the value is, of course, the prompt that we previously created, right? All right, so let's hand that over to our invocation here. Sorry, input args. But that's not all, right? We want to get the value back. We want to receive the test data. So we need a variable to store that. Data. Okay, no errors, but still something's fishy here, because what we get returned here is not a string. It's actually a dictionary again. So if we want to store it in a string, we have to do something. From a dictionary, we have to receive it. So we have to tell it what is the actual parameter that we want to get from that dictionary. In our case, as we've seen here in Ask GPT, it's called test data. And now as we get it back, this is of type object. So we have to do one more thing. We have to convert it to a string. All right, now we got our test data. Last thing, we save it to a CSV. That's an easy one. We again use file object. We simply say write all text. And then we hand over the path. Let's use directory.get current directory plus testdata.csv. That's where we want to store it in. And the actual content is test data. Test data. Ooh, good. I think that's it. I think it was pretty quick. I speed it up. I hope it was not too quick for you to follow, but you anyway get the project. So we should be good now. We have created the create data class, and we filled out the execute method to do all that magic. Let's see if it also works. For that, let me move over to our main workflow and trigger that one. No worries. Let's try again. Project is compiling. All right. Perfect. So here's our form. Now we can select the test case that we want to create data for. Come on. Yeah, here we have our file explorer, the open file dialog you've seen previously, right? So documents, UiPath. This was the apply for long CS. This was the code-based, the coded automation test case that we've seen previously. We want to select that. You see, we selected that. The file path is here. Now we want to add some additional context. So what is the additional context for our test data? Well, it actually is the acceptance criteria here, right? That's what we want to make sure the test data incorporates. So we simply copy the user story acceptance criteria here, and we can add even more. Let's say, let's make it at least 15 data records. Additionally, add country as an additional, additional parameter. I hope it is able to deal with my misspelling. parameter to the data set. Use different countries. So you can be free here and define your prompt, so to say, your additional context that you want to have. So we take the existing definition of the test case. It already tells us those are the arguments that we absolutely need. And you can provide additional context to make it more fine-grained. Now let's see if this really works. Let's create the test data. Execution is running. Let's give it some time. As soon as it's done, we expect a message box to appear. There we go. Data created successfully. Let's hit OK. And let's see what we get. Let's open the test data. Drum roll. There we go. So that was created by GPT based on our test case definition. So it took all those arguments our test case uses. It also added, in this case, city, not country. So there's a little mistake. But you have a thorough test set now, synthetic test data that you created very easily, very quick. And you could add your own flavor with the context. So that's pretty much it. I hope that was somewhat helpful and interesting. Please feel free to give it a try as well. We share the examples anyways. And we are happy to further discuss if there are any questions.
Really exciting, Thomas. I think at my previous engagements, sometimes this process took days, right, to generate the test data. We have a few questions. I'm not sure if you want to dive into all of them. I have one from Saurabh. He's asking, how will we update element properties like timeout, etc. in the code? I'm not sure, maybe you have something open where you can show how to change this?
Timeout properties, so properties in general.
Yeah, or the click options, for example.
Yes, so that's a good one. We every now and then get questions like, how do I change the click type? Because what you can see here is the straightforward. That's easy to use, but you might need something else. And as you mentioned, the click options, for example, there's objects for that you can use. There's click options, my click options. You can instantiate click options. Let's add the context here. And those click options, right, click option. Yeah, you have something, for example, like an interaction mode. So there's a lot of properties, right? You can set, but one is the interaction mode. You could say the interaction mode should be, there's a enum for that. That's stuff you either know or you have to figure out. We have a documentation as well, API documentation. What is it called? Child interaction mode. Let's add that as well. Using API. Next dot simulate. So there's possibilities for pretty much everything. Such specific topics might take a little more effort, but they are available. We try to focus on the straight through to be as easy as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. And there was one more question from VJ. Can we generate test data for more volume, like 100 or 200 plus records? Like, is there any limit?
Well, the limit is, first of all, the prompt that you define. You know, if you interact with OpenAI API, there's a limit on what you can feed in and what you get out. Depending on what that limit is, that might be changeable depending on your API key. But that's pretty much the limit. Or you split it up and make it several prompts. But that's up to you to decide and implement the right way.
Yeah, and I think with ChatGPT-4 you can also use more characters, right?
True.
Okay, and then I'm trying to answer this one. Vincent is asking, does any of this apply to citizen developers, or is this directed more at professionals? Some of our citizen developers know Python, but few have experience with C#. And I know you said something about Python that I was also very excited about, Thomas. So is that something you can tell anything about?
Yeah, we had the question multiple times in the chat today. So the question was, hey, C#, okay, what's next? Can we do Java? Can we do this? Can we do that? We asked our community already. We are constantly getting more feedback on that. The most eligible targets for us in terms of next technology to support are Python and JavaScript.
And can you shed some light on when those will be available, even if it's just a line in the sand?
2024.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks, Vijay. I hope that answers your question. Back to you, Christina.
I will cut in a bit, yeah. So since we are, you started the Q&A, let's continue at least 5 more minutes with the Q&A, because now anyone is able to unmute. Thomas Stocker, our colleague, there is one more question we have not answered. I think Thomas missed that. From Balaraman, and he's asking, as we have coded automation in Studio and Studio already integrates with GitHub, do you see any roadmap to integrate with GitHub Copilot with Studio to generate the code for code automation? That would be interesting and accelerates developer productivity.
Christina, that's the best segue to this slide, actually. So we would really invite you to join forward if you have the chance, either virtually or in person. And 23.10 will be one of our best releases so far. And it's packed with AI functionality. You mentioned Copilot. We have something that is pretty much the same. We allow you to use AI to generate manual test cases. We allow you to use AI to convert those manual test cases to automation using something similar to Copilot. And we even allow you to use AI to investigate and analyze test results. So check out 23.10, join forward if possible. You will get your Copilot in the Studio.
Balaraman, is there anything you want to add to that question? Or
I will wait for this forward 6 to happen. I will see there how it is. For now, it is fine, Krishna. Thanks for that.
Awesome.
Thank you, Balaraman, for the question. And we have one more question from John. Do you foresee having this kind of functionality available via drag and drop objects instead of having to code in a formal language?
Good question. So our Wingman, which is similar to Copilot, should support you in writing code as well. Like Copilot, you're writing a comment, enter, bam. Would a drag and drop for selectors be useful? We already thought about that. I'm not yet certain if and when, but I think in general, it's a good idea. Yes. So we want to make it easier, of course.
Okay. Guys, you are now able to unmute and ask questions live. We'll stay for 5 more minutes if anyone wants to ask a live question. So you can drop the chat now and simply ask live for Thomas or Thomas. No other questions? You will have the deck and recording. You will have them tomorrow on the event page, and as well you will receive a notification through email with links. But let's see if there are any more questions, since you have this great occasion now to ask them live, and this was a very long-awaited and very interesting session. And Thomas gave you the link to subscribe to his Tom Stack Academy in the chat.
Do it. I already did it as well. It's totally worth.
Okay, while you think whether you might have or not other questions to ask, I will also then take this chance, since we started with the promo part now, and share our upcoming sessions in the Dev Dive series. We have an upcoming session, the next one. So basically it's end of the month, every month, as we promised, 1 year long. We're already on the 8th month of the series, so it's going well so far. Next one is September 28th, Mastering AI-Powered Document Understanding. And we just published yesterday the October session, which is Explore UiPath Solutions Management for Seamless Packaging, Deployment, and Maintenance. And we will also share with you the links in the chat for all 4 sessions. I think my colleague already did that. Let's see. and you will also have it in the deck. So don't worry. Okay, so if okay, Sophia, if we can share the links to the next session in the chat. And while we wait for these links, if you have any other questions, or we are good for today. I think all the chat questions were addressed so far. And you can tell us what you had, what's your feedback from the session, like how did you enjoy it, whether it was good, informative. I see the feedback so far is good, but it's always good to put there a few words for us to know whether we did our job okay, what can we do better. You have the link to the whole dev dive series now in the chat. So you can simply go on page and check which are the upcoming published sessions. We published all the way to October now. We will publish November and December soon. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much, everyone. So thank you for your participation. Thank you to our speaker, Thomas Stoker and Thomas Janssen, our UiPath MVP. Great session today. I think the feedback was good since the beginning. So, and when you have a huge period of silence, it means that everyone is really concentrated on what you present, since no one dropped off mid session. Very good to see that. Thank you also to our entire team who put this together. Sophia, Roxana, and the other Sophia who supported us in the chat. So there are a lot of UiPathers in the chat, and the MVPs as well. A lot of forces joined together when each time this series come along. So Roxana, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, we want to thank you, Christina, as well, and to your team. And thank you all for joining us. I mean, the feedback was really, really useful for us.
Yeah, you will also have the opportunity to give feedback on a feedback form. Following the event, you will receive an email notification. So we welcome any feedback and whatever you want to say about upcoming sessions or suggest, just feel free to write down in the feedback form, because we are reading it very closely every month. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day, evening, and see you not necessarily next month. You can check our upcoming sessions in community till then, but if not, yes, in September. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Ciao.
All right.